Okay, welcome everyone. This is the second video for chapter 7. Okay, in the previous chapter video, we learned about the external events that influence people to start to resist against the British rule, to want to have independence. So there were people who did not want British rule anymore. So the British got very worried and tried to get people to continue to still support them. So in this video, we're going to see how did the British try and win local support. Okay, now the first thing you need to know is there were a lot of problems that people were facing in Singapore. So the British government or the British military administration, which was the British government's name then, okay, they wanted to try and fix some of these problems. So let's see what was some of these problems and how the British handled them. Okay, so the first problem that people had was housing challenges. Okay, first problem, housing challenges. Okay, now there was a housing shortage. Okay, because houses have been destroyed or have become run down during the war. Okay, during the wartime. Okay, and there was another problem. There were not enough houses because the population was rapidly growing. Okay. Why was it growing so much? Because there's a baby boom. A baby boom basically means there's a very high birth rate. So there were a lot of people in Singapore. As a result, there was overcrowding. So even if the house was very good, with many people staying, with a very big families, the housing condition can become quite poor. And because of that, many people, they have to live in some sort of slums. Slum refers to like overcrowded or rundown area. So it's a very poor housing situation. Okay, you can see in the source they say Chinatown is over congested. Okay, there were people have to stay with many people, so it's very crowded. And crowded also means diseases and illnesses can spread very easily. Okay, so these are very poor housing situation. So what did the British do about it? Okay, so to address this problem, the British set up the Singapore Improvement Trust. This is basically an organization set up, okay, to build blocks, houses for the Singapore. Okay, so they wanted to provide low-cost housing. This Singapore Improvement Trust wanted to provide low-cost housing, and they built a lot of all this low-cost housing. However, many people, the shortages continue to persist, partly because the population was simply too big. There was not enough houses. They were not able to build the new houses fast enough, and many continue to live in cramped conditions. So although the British was trying to win the locals' favor by building new houses, they were not able to do that fast enough. Okay. The next problem that people deal with, the second problem, was food shortages. We learned about this in the last chapter when, under the Japanese, there was food shortage. After the war, there was a food shortage because the harbor was blocked. Other countries were not producing enough food to sell to Singapore. So what did the British try to do to fix the food shortage problem? Okay, so remember we talked about how war had disrupted shipping. So food was not able to flow into Singapore. Okay. Their neighboring countries did not have enough rice to sell to Singapore. Okay, there was a lot of malnutrition and people could not keep up with the high rising food prices. So what did the British do? The British set up this thing called the People's Restaurant, okay, to provide affordable meals for people. And they set up at least 10 of these People's Restaurant to try and feed people. Okay, so that was very good effort on the British part. Okay, so the third way the British try to address the post-war problem is to manage this thing called industrial unrest. Industrial unrest basically refers to the working situation. So people were very unhappy with their working situation at that time, and there were often a lot of strikes. Strikes basically means they refuse to work. Okay, you can see strikes. People refuse to work because they want to try to get things like higher pay. They want to threaten their employers, basically. So they went on strike. Okay. So there were many people who did not like their working condition. Okay. And many of them were influenced by this group called the trade unions, which is basically like an organization trying to fight for the workers' rights. Okay, so they wanted to improve their working conditions. So what did the British do? Okay, the British, instead of working with the trade union, they suspected the trade unions are linked to this group called the communists. Okay, and they were instigating all this anti-colonial feeling and instigating the strike. I mean, he believed that all these strikes were because of all these communist people. So what did the British do? They try to control the trade unions. Okay, and they require all the trade unions to have to register in the government so that they know whether your trade union, are you really a trade union or are you working for the communists? Okay, so the government, okay, don't allow the trade unions to support strikes and protest against government. Okay, so the government try to control the trade union so that workers, maybe they won't strike so much. Okay, so that was the third way that the British. So obviously this one is not trying to make the workers happy, but trying to show that the some problems that the British had to deal with it. Okay. The other thing about rebuilding economy is how the British tried to win support. Okay. So the economy was very poor. Okay, and people needed trade and industry to go on. Okay, without trade and industry, people will not have jobs. Okay, and the government will not have enough tax revenue. Okay, so what did the British do? They repaired the ports that have been damaged during, and when you repair the ports, Singapore was able to become a trading center again. Okay, and at the same time, there was growing demand for these things like tin and rubber. Okay, so by repairing the port, the government can start selling all these tin and rubber that were from Malaya, that were in Singapore, and start to earn some money and improve the economy. Okay, so as a port city, so basically the British made Singapore back into an active port city. That what they did, they exported raw materials such as oil, tin, rubber, and Indonesia from Malaya and Indonesia. So we started selling all these things that were found in Malaya, like oil, tin, rubber, and timber, okay, to other countries. And we sold it through Singapore since we have a very nice port in Singapore. So Singapore was able to make some money from this selling all these raw materials. Okay. The last way the British tried to win support is to allow locals some participation in politics. Okay, local political participation. So they basically held an election in 1948, thinking that if people, they can get a say in who represents in the government, they might support the government a little bit more. So for example, if the British government, instead of the country being run by all British people, I allow some locals to be part of the government, maybe they will support the government a little bit more and maybe hate the British government a little bit less. Okay, so that was the 1948 election, okay, to give people more chance to run the country and also make the people less unhappy. Okay, make them happy a little bit because people want independence, want freedom. So they gave them this local political participation, this chance to run an election and be part of the government. Okay, all right, so that is all for this section. In the next section, we will cover how did the riots happen in the 1950s and how all these British efforts to try and win support, okay, whether it's about food shortage, whether it's rebuilding economy, it did not make people in Singapore a lot happier, and as a result, it led to some of these riots that we're going to learn in the next section. All right, see you in the next video.